You know that feeling when you're midway through your career, sensing a pull towards something different? That's halftime. Welcome to the Halftime Leadership Podcast with Cosmin Gabriel. Drawing inspiration from his experiences of over 20 years in corporate America, marketing agencies, and entrepreneurship, Cosmin navigates those deeply personal transitions and the possibilities they unveil. Whether you're considering a move into fractional executive leadership, dreaming of a renewed sense of freedom, or just eager for a change, you're in the right place. Dive into stories of reimagining roles, learn lessons from other executive leaders, and gather tools for your next big leap. Because sometimes, halftime is the perfect time to reshape the strategy of the game. Go ahead and subscribe now to this podcast. Settle in, take a deep breath, and let's explore the world of halftime leadership together.
Welcome there to the Halftime Leadership Podcast. My name is Cosmin Gabriel, and I'm your host. And in this edition, I am going to be covering a great topic that is near and dear to my heart, and that is transition confessions, from corporate pro to fractional executive. And we're going to be exploring the fundamental learnings and challenges of fractional executives and what it means to be one. And speaking of being one, we're going to have a special guest. Her name is Kirstan Cecil, and she's the founder and CEO of KC Business Growth Consultancy. And she brings over 25 years of executive level brand and marketing experience with expertise in pioneering high-touch customer experiences, marketing strategies, and specialized communication programs. And now Kirstan is a fractional CMO and has been doing it for quite some time, and I'm really looking forward to having her share her transition confession. So let's go ahead and listen to the interview.
Hi, Cosmin. It's good to be here.
Fantastic. Well, great to have you here. And let's go ahead and kick it off. Can you tell us more about your corporate professional background and what got you to consider the role of a fractional CMO?
Sure. So I've spent my entire career in marketing. I started in the senior living space and had a great experience there, was part of an organization. We grew from 3 local communities to 23 nationally. And so that was an incredible learning experience about branding, new territories. And after that, I transitioned over into the healthcare space, serving as the Chief Marketing Officer for one of the largest health systems in the United States, the Baltimore, Washington market specifically. And so throughout my career, I've been responsible for leading branding, rebrands, growth strategies, internal communications, and kind of all things marketing, which has changed over the years from, a little bit less traditional these days and more digital. But what got me to consider becoming a fractional CMO is an interesting question. So I had left my job right before COVID hit. I was taking a little bit of time off, thinking about, my next step. And when COVID hit, some decisions were made for me. And it really actually gave me the gift of time to think about going out on my own. It was something I always wanted to do, but kind of had the fear and wasn't sure that it was the right thing. But again, during COVID, it seemed like the right time, and I thought I would go for it and just kind of see how things are going. I had a really strong support system, which made a significant impact on my ability to do that. And 3 years later, I'm still standing, still figuring some things out, but still standing.
Well, kudos to you. Fantastic. 3 years in. I think you're somebody in the corporate space that transitioned to a fractional leadership role early on, right? I think, many are curious about it now. They may have heard about it, and it's great to have you here.
Being in the fractional space at this moment in time is a pretty cool space to be in.
Yeah, that's right. Well, let's go ahead and dive into some questions, some confessions, right? And what are some of the key differences and challenge that you encountered when you moved from a full-time corporate position to working on a fractional basis?
Yeah. So lots of challenges. And I think when you're out on your own, that's kind of the name of the game, challenges every step of the way. But I would say a couple of key challenges. One is, most people, when they decide to take the leap from the corporate space to going out on their own, they have a client or two kind of lined up. I did not have that. Because of the dynamics. And so I really was starting from zero. I don't recommend that. If someone out there is listening and thinking about doing it, I think, having that lined up is always a much better intro. I think keeping the client pipeline rolling is a huge challenge. In the beginning, it's getting those clients. But then once you have the clients and you're busy, it's making sure that you don't drop that business development. I think a lot of people do that. And that's something that, when you have your own business, that's an always thing. So that was definitely a big learning experience. I think that, it can be lonely out on your own. You go from having a team and colleagues and, I came from big organizations, to being one. And so that was a definite challenge. And then I would also say that the world doesn't fully understand what fractional is. And so a lot of the work is kind of educating people and, helping them understand the benefits of it and what it is and what it could look like in their organization. I will say one of the biggest differences from kind of the corporate to this space is the ability to work when you are at your best. And, sometimes that's 4 a.m, sometimes that's, 10 o'clock at night. But you don't have those, confines of corporate hours. You can kind of do your thing when you can do it best.
Yeah, I love that. And, just thinking about that, I think it's a common factor for many of us, right? The transition, we want that freedom. We want that ability to be able to, not be confined by, that structure. And so, but to your point, right, it could be lonely. So I think, ensuring that you're putting the right guardrails in place, right, making the right routines, the right habits is, fundamental, and being in a good space, right? Because for some people, a good space is 4 a.m. in the morning.
That's right.
That's not me.
I know. That's right.
Yeah, and I think a good follow-up to that is, how did you navigate some of these challenges? So maybe if you can talk a little bit more about, how did you navigate that, just kind of adjustment, right? You said like being lonely, or potentially, right, being lonely, or and you also mentioned here, the world doesn't really know what fractional is, and I think that's very true today, right? And we're hoping that we continue to educate not only fractionals that are interested and want to grow, but also companies, right, of what it really means to be a fractional executive. And so, yeah, can you talk a little about how did you navigate maybe the working more independently and helping educate others?
Yeah. So as far as working independently, I think that one of the main things is finding your tribe, finding your people, and there are a lot of options out there as far as learning about fractional CMO as well as just fractional as a whole. And there's a lot of really great groups and networking and people that you can learn from that have kind of gone before you, but also just to bounce ideas. I mean, I think that, as far as the, feeling alone, just to have other colleagues that are, former executives in this space, working with new organizations, sharing challenges and bouncing ideas around is one. And I think too, as far as I'm trying to think I'm looking at my notes to think of some of the challenges we were talking about. Understanding fractional. Sorry, I lost my track there. That if I'm honest, I learned a lot about fractional when I came out. It's not, I can't say that I left corporate to be a fractional. I don't know that I knew that that's what it was, as I was making that transition. And so really, just having conversations and talking to people, because it's making sure that we define it appropriately and that people understand it. And again, I think that the world is ready for it right now. COVID set us up for comfort, Zooming and being across, you don't have to be in that space. But also I think that companies are getting very smart about their finances and looking at their goals and what they need to accomplish, but understanding that there might be more fiscally sound ways to get there and still accomplish the same, if not more.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah, and I love your point about the world is ready for it now. And you kind of mentioned the experience of starting during COVID. I remember prior to COVID, it was maybe 2017, 2018, and I was working for a large corporation and very tech forward, tech savvy, and we were beginning to accept remote workers, but remote executives was very taboo, right?
Yep.
And we had a very progressive CMO at the time that wanted to adopt it. And as a matter of fact, I think we had in a marketing organization of 300 or so, there were two, maybe three remote executives. And there was technology to make sure that they were present even, and I'm talking like robotic technology. I'm not going to get into the details, but the point is the basics of meetings, right? Like we would all physically be in a room, get started in the meeting, and then like 18 minutes in, people are like, wait, so-and-so is remote. Let's tune them in, right? Now it's opposite of that, right? Where you think, all right, let's get everybody together first, virtually, or already attach a Zoom or a Microsoft Teams. But more importantly, as leaders, like we've learned how to be able to manage remote teams, right? And I remember a few years ago, that was one of the conditions and even job requirements, like, do you know how to manage a remote team? And
Right.
the timing is really, really well, not just tactically, but also from a leadership perspective. There's so many ways now that as a leader, and specifically executive leader, not only with the teams that we manage, but also the peers at the executive level and the CEO or head of the company, being able to collaborate in that way. And so you're right. I think those challenges have been overcome. Now it's a matter of how do you lead effectively. So that's fantastic.
Yeah.
Cool. So let's keep going. This is great insight, great information. Another thing I'd love to talk about is just some fundamental learnings and skills you've found most critical, right? As you kind of talked about, we'll say the blocking and tackling of communication, et cetera. But, what are some of those fundamental learnings for the past 3 years and skills that you found most critical in your role as a fractional CMO, which may be different from your previous corporate experience?
Yeah. I think that most of them are pretty different from previous corporate experience. It's just different skill sets. So as far as learnings, first and foremost is don't wait to start building your network. Do it now. I mean, and I wish that somebody would have told me that when I was in the corporate space, because even in the corporate space, there's value to that. I've definitely learned that though, over the last 3 years, that networking and building connections, and it's not about building business. That's kind of a benefit that comes from it, but just building those connections. That's been a huge kind of learning experience of how important that is. Again, we talked about kind of finding your people. There's a lot of networking groups and courses and all of that, and really making sure that you find your space and what works for you, and that's going to be different for everybody. I will also say that efficiency is key, and it's having access to proven proposals and frameworks and models. If you can become a part of a group that offers that, that's a huge win, because that can literally propel you 6 months ahead of you trying to build everything out on your own. And again, people have gone before us. They've built all of this. You know that better than anyone. And you have access to that. So I would definitely say take advantage of that. That it's a big deal. And then I think the other big learning is sales, is to learn about sales and how to sell yourself. And that is not necessarily a skill set that you learn or use in the corporate world, other than, those initial interviews, right, where you're selling yourself. But then once you're in, you're not doing that anymore. And being able to build relationships and communicate clearly, the offerings and the benefits, those are skill sets that everybody who's going to be out on their own will have to learn and develop for sure.
That's great. Yeah. And I think all three of those, and just to kind of recap, right? Don't wait to build your network. Do it now. Efficiency is key. Find tools, resources, and, sales/sell yourself, right? And the reality is, unless you're a fractional CRO or sales officer, that is not a native instinct for us, right?
That's right.
And I'm thinking of the fractional CFOs out there. I'm thinking of fractional, maybe COOs, even to a point fractional CMOs, right? I mean, we take on so much to sell others. It's how do you sell yourself? And so I think personal branding is also very important. And the reality is, I would also encourage listeners, if you have been in a large organization, you also remember, even if you're a marketing leader or any kind of marketing leader, even within an organization, what are some of those skills that you use there to, personally brand yourself within the company, right? How can you take some of those skill sets? Because the reality is, as a high performer within a large organization, you need to stand out. And so even do a checklist of like, what are some of those things that you did tactically, and begin to start, leveraging that in a virtual way, in a remote way, right? With potential prospects and clients. So that's something to think about as well. So love that. Build your network, do it now, efficiency, sales, sell yourself. And, that is a big barrier, I think, to many people. And I've heard a lot of fractional executives that are curious. And I was recently at a conference, and that we use that term a lot, those that are fractionally curious to become executives. That was a big thing about them, is like, hey, I don't know how to sell myself. I don't like the biz dev part of it. But the reality is, I think, once you find that, like you said, framework or approach or system or automation, it becomes natural. And it's just, you start seeing those conversations come in, every single week. And there are ways to do it. And that's why, Fractional Officer Method and so many others are out there to do and help. So awesome.
And I think too, Cosmin, you just said something that, a statement that I always try to remind myself with that, is progress over perfection, and when you're talking about sales and all of that, it's not something that most people are comfortable with, selling themselves. Like you said, as marketers, that's what we do, right? Like that we do that every day, all day for our clients. But when it comes to doing it for ourselves, it's hard. But you just get out there and do it. And each time that you do it, you get better, you learn more, and you kind of refine and tweak. So progress over perfection, because you're not going to be perfect the first time, or probably not the second or third either.
That's right. That's a great point. Progress over perfection. Okay. So let's go ahead and move on to another question that I want to just kind of ask. And, I think it's around this idea of, unique opportunities and advantages. We've talked a little bit about some of the, the challenges, would love to hear your perspective. What are some unique opportunities, advantages that you've discovered in your role as a fractional CMO compared to a traditional full-time employment, right? So would love to hear your perspective on that.
Yeah, I think that one of the greatest advantages, in my opinion, is the ability to work with so many different great companies and great people. Obviously, when you're in a corporate job, that's your job, that's who you're working with, that's what you're doing. And as a fractional, you're working with a variety of different organizations. And so you learn from them, but you also learn to adjust and tweak your processes to each of those unique clients. And so it keeps things fresh. It's almost impossible to get bored in a fractional role just because of that dynamic. And then I also think that, going back to something that we talked about earlier, one of the advantages is that by definition, your network grows immensely, as you're doing this. And again, it's not always necessarily a network discussion that's going to get you your next client. It's a lot of times a discussion where you're just going to learn a new skill or learn a new perspective or approach. And so taking advantage of that. My network has grown immensely since being out on my own. And I love talking to other people and kind of learning and hearing from their experiences. Even if a CFO, you would think that there'd be no, similarities between that and a CMO, but there are in just learning from each other. So that's been helpful. And then I think from an opportunity standpoint, specific to the fractional role is, being at the forefront. I love that we're at the forefront of this, and we are the ones that are helping to shape what that means and what it will be in the future. And that's it's just an exciting time, and it's important work, because I do think that this model is the future, and I like that we're able to kind of shape what that looks like.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's great. And I love that last point, or second to last point, around the network grows immensely and other fractionals, right?
Yeah.
And one of the things that I found most rewarding is, meeting, others in other industries, right? So the reality is, I always have a mindset of, if I'm a CMO at an organization and I'm brought in, I need to connect with other peers, right? The head of finance, CFO, the head of ops, right? The head of HR, right? And so when you come into an organization, not only do you provide the value from a functional level, but you also have to network. If there's a challenge in that company in another area, to bring on board another referral and recommendation. And I think that's also an opportunity as fractionals to scale, right? To kind of bring on board that person and work out some type of relationship agreement. And so, you always want to keep that network growing and having that, potential partnership opportunity. That's great.
No doubt. There's nothing better than when you're working with a client and a need arises, and you have this broad network that you can pull from and provide that added benefit to the clients that you're working with, and bring in somebody that and trust, and that they're going to do a good job and kind of help move things forward. So that's huge. And again, as far as opportunities, you just said something as well, that, so much of our work is building those relationships and
Mm-hmm.
collaborative spirit with the other leaders, the other executive leaders in the organization. That's critical as a fractional, having that opportunity to, we talked about being lonely, but those are the moments where, you really get to, kind of pull out your relationship building skills, which, I think is something that most people that are entering this space are pretty good at.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, sounds like a lot of work, which leads me to my last question. I think most of us are getting into this space because we want more freedom, we want more income, we want more purpose, but the reality is it's a lot of work. So can you talk a little bit about maintaining that work-life balance as a fractional? How do you find this differs, being a fractional executive versus a corporate career? Are there differences? How do you kind of manage and maintain that? And what tips do you have for others?
Yeah, it's this is always an interesting one, the work-life balance idea. And I have to laugh about this because I don't think it ever goes away. I look at my parents who are in retirement and they're trying to balance their volunteer work and their fun. And I mean, I just think it's part of us as human beings is balancing that. And so I think that transitioning from corporate to this fractional space, that push-pull dynamic didn't go away. It's just different. And so in my opinion, I think that the work-life balance, it really comes down to, for me, two main things. It's stress and kind of your ability to manage time. And I think that the difference kind of going out on your own is there's still a lot of stress. And in fact, there's new stresses that you didn't have when you were in the corporate space. But I feel like it's stress that I'm in control over. And so, and that may sound a little bit crazy, but it's, I can manage that more because it's my stress and it's the future of my business and my work. And so I kind of can manage that stress a little bit more. And then as far as the time and being able to turn things off, it's a little bit more challenging when you're on your own because this is your baby, it's your business, it's the success is in your hands, and so it is harder to turn that off. It's very easy to kind of keep going nonstop, and so I think that from an advice standpoint, I don't know, I certainly don't have the answers, and I'm open to other people's advice on this for sure, but I think that being able to turn off and, be 100% present in whatever it is that you're doing. So if you're working, be 100% present. And when you shut that down and you're out with family, friends, yourself, whatever that may be 100% present. I just think that that's kind of a critical break between the work and the fun type thing. And then I also think just finding time, going back to turning it off, you've got to find time for your health, for rejuvenation, for, mental wellness, whatever that may be, but really making sure that you are, as much as you block that time off for your clients, for your business development, you've got to block that off for yourself as well.
Yeah, that's I think solid advice. Just blocking things off. That's been critical to how I run my business as a fractional executive. I mean, I'm very intentional on the companies that I have, like literally blocking in, color coding. Right, here's the dedicated time, and even communicating to those companies, this is my time dedicated to you. Now, there also needs to be a balance, I believe, in how you are a colleague within the organization versus a vendor, and that's probably for another topic or discussion.
Right.
But there's ways around that where you can feel like you're part of the organization while still having blocks of time that are dedicated, and just and to manage your wellness. Everything else is even more critical because the reality is in corporate world, right? Like you're at a desk, but it's constant drive-bys. You may walk up, get down. There's many times as a fractional executive, you're at your desk. Your watch has to remind you to stand up, right?
I was just thinking about that. I was going to say, and you have your watch and you look at your steps, and sometimes it's not the proudest moment.
Yeah, exactly. So I think we all need to do a better job of that. Just overall, right? So that's fantastic. Well, I know we had a great discussion. We're about time. And I just want to thank you, Kirstan. I think that was a fantastic confessions.
Yeah, this was fun.
And I want to just thank all the listeners. And I know you'll continue to subscribe to the podcast here, because we're really excited about how we tell these stories of leaders and what we like to call our halftime leadership, right? We're at this point in our life and in our journey where we just believe that we're meant and called for more, and we're trying to discover and find what that is. And being a fractional executive is a great place to be in how you approach your career. And so just, some of the takeaways, loved, what you mentioned, Kirstan, around just finding your tribe, that community. There's a lot of great communities out there, being, growing your network, do it now, don't wait. And it's an ongoing thing, be efficient, remember that you are in a position to sell yourself, right? And that leads to sales. And so even though it's not a native instinct, it's something that we want to continue to evolve. And, it's a great thing to be a fractional executive. Your network grows continuously. We're at the forefront, and, it's just a great time to be a fractional executive. So
it is.
With that being said, once again, thank you so much, Kirstan. And before we wrap up the podcast, how can people connect with you if they have any more questions or want to reach out to you?
Yeah, absolutely. So Cosmin, thank you for having me. This was a lot of fun. I always enjoy our conversations. So people can find me on my website at kirstancecil.com, and also come visit me on LinkedIn. I'd love to connect and keep growing my network.
Fantastic. So thank you for that. We'll love to follow you, right? And everybody that's listening, I know your traffic and your clients are going to just scale significantly from this podcast. And so I really appreciate it. And so until next time, this is Cosmin Gabriel with Fractional Officer, where our goal is to help corporate professional leaders transition to become successful fractional executives, and in turn, to live a life of more freedom, income, and purpose. Let's set the standard together. Thank you for tuning in to the Halftime Leadership Podcast. I hope you found today's episode valuable and inspiring. If you're eager to transition in your halftime journey to the world of fractional executive leadership, I invite you to visit fractionalofficer.com. I'll show you how to be a successful fractional executive and save you months of trial and error through my proven fractional officer method. Also, go to LinkedIn groups today and search for Fractional Officer Community. Join countless others who have chosen a new career journey with fractional executive leadership. Don't forget to subscribe and tell others about this podcast. Once again, this is Cosmin signing off for this episode. See you soon on the next Halftime Leadership Podcast.